Welcome back to part 2 of License to Legacy Thunderball. I'm co-host Javi Trujillo, and joining me once again is David Leigh from the James Bond Dossier and Bill Koenig of the Spy Command. How are you both doing today?
I am doing very well, thank you.
Doing great.
Excellent. Well, last time when we left off, we were discussing Kevin McClory and the rights issues to Thunderball, how that impacted Spectre and other forms of media. Part of Thunderball's legacy has been the influence it's had on the Austin Powers series, with several references and jokes inspired by the film. And granted, Austin Powers took a lot from the Connery era and even the Casino Royale adaptation from the 60s, but there's so many references to Thunderball, and those jokes have eventually become detrimental to Bond, with Austin Powers and Dr. Evil eventually revealed to be long-lost brothers, something that Spectre and No Time to Die have tried to take back. Key emphasis being on tried to take back.
I don't think I have seen the whole of Austin Powers. I've seen bits
all
of
three
it.
movies, or
no?
like
I mean, I don't think
one?
I've even seen. I think I've seen part of the first one.
Wow.
So yeah.
Well, for example, Robert Wagner's character is called Number Two, and he's wearing an eye patch like Largo. So I mean, that's what.
Oh my! I can't even remember what their organization is called. There's like they have like the shell company, I think, of like VirtueCon or something, but they all meet around a giant table with the different members, with Dr. Evil as the head as number one. And, you know, when someone displeases him, there's a button to push and he can dispose of people at the table, much like we saw in Thunderball. But, you know, even with the whole, by the third movie, it's revealed that they were brothers separated at a very young age and they had forgotten. Bond tried to take it back with Blofeld and Bond being foster brothers for a brief moment.
I didn't know all this, but given that the script writers probably did, the script writers for Spectre knew this, I can't believe that they actually went with the stepbrother line.
You know, it's funny because Daniel Craig did one of his many interviews where he said Austin Powers, quote, fucked us, unquote, because
I remember that.
It then became funny. So we can't do humor anymore. Okay, Daniel. But then a short while later, you come up with this foster brother nonsense. So since he was so involved in the creative side, he bears some responsibility for that decision. And I just have this vision in my head that someone like Barbara Broccoli says, you know, this will be more dramatic if they're foster brothers and they have a personal motive. And like everyone around the table is, great, boss. Yeah, boss, that's a wonderful idea. Yeah, boss, that's wonderful. Because to me, it's like somebody should have said, that's a terrible idea. What are you talking about? Remember Austin Powers?
Well, it was one of those movies where, you know, there was a slew of like 90s SNL inspired films coming out, and especially with like the cast of Saturday Night Live. And we'd seen one of them starring John Lovitz called High School High, and it was abysmal. And, you know, we gave my friend hell for making us go see it. And there came a weekend where there was nothing for us to do. It was just the two of us hanging out. And he's like, well, we could go see Austin Powers. It was like the Dollar Theater. And just after that High School High movie, like, okay, we can't tell anyone if we go see this because the prior experiences, but we saw it and there were so many Bond jokes and references that I got that, you know, that I really enjoyed it. And it later became a huge thing on video. And it always made me wonder, like, how many people are going back and getting these references? Because how many people at my age had seen some of the Connerys? Because again, 1997, there's, you know, VHS, there's Laserdisc, DVD was barely becoming a thing. And, you know, the Bonds weren't available at that point. So you have to wonder, like, what the impact is and what people's first impressions are. Because if you see Austin Powers first and then watch Thunderball, maybe it loses some of its power. And that's definitely, if you look at like John Carter of Mars, the Disney movie, people decried that it was ripping off Star Wars. It's like, well, no, Star Wars was inspired by the original novels. So has Austin Powers done more harm than good to the films that inspired it?
Well, it's been it's been more than 20 years since the last Austin Powers movie. And, Mike Myers threatens every so often to do a fourth one. Uh,
That is a
I,
threat.
yeah, so maybe initially, at the time, because the first one was 97, the second one was 99,
99.
And the third was, I believe, 2002.
Wasn't there a report that they were thinking about doing a fourth one, but Barbara Broccoli very firmly said enough's enough with that. If you do number 4, we're going after you.
I mean, what leg would you have to stand on if it's a parody?
The last one was called Goldmember in 2002. And there was some kind of dust up and threats of lawsuits. And that came out, I believe, in the summer of 2002. Die Another Day was going to come out in the fall. To kind of settle things over, they would promote Die Another Day somehow, maybe a teaser trailer attached to Goldmember, something like that. So yeah, there was some sensitivity. Parody's protected speech.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't recall Broccoli and Saltzman suing Mad Magazine when they had the 1965 version of a James Bond musical where all the songs are sung to the tunes of songs from Oklahoma. And they called him James Bomb instead of James Bond, which is a trick of Mad engaged in. Slightly changed the name.
From memory, and this may be very misremembered because it's all many years ago now, but I thought there was even a suggestion that the title was going to be For Your Thighs Only.
I think Mad used that as a parody for Your Eyes Only.
Maybe I'm confusing the two things then.
Well, the second film was The Spy Who Shagged Me. Mm-hmm. And then in Goldmember, there was a movie being made within the movie, and that was Austin Pussy. They've definitely have bandied about with, their parody Bond names. I would definitely recommend, if you're a fan of 60s Bond, then, to watch the first one, because there are some good, references and jokes that I think you would appreciate. And then I feel like as it went on, it became less and less Bond and more of, his own character and repeating the same jokes over and over again. But that in and of itself, the formulaic aspect is very much, that Goldfinger to Die Another Day era of Bond movies. So
it's not that I've actively tried not to watch them. It's just that I just saw one of them when it was on TV once, when I actually watched broadcast TV, and I've never gone out of my way to watch any of the others, or even that, indeed. So that's all. One day I'll catch up with everybody else.
Well, switching gears, has Thunderball influenced your personal style?
Not really. I mean, I do like the way that Connery dresses it in Thunderball. I think it's tropical, and he makes the most of that kind of climate, and but as for me personally, not really. I mean, I tend to just wear polo shirts, so I think Daniel Craig copied me.
Well, do you have any camp collar shirts in your closet?
No. One reason is, I was 7 years old when the movie first came out, and it's like, to really adopt style, you have to be an adult and have an income. So I never really thought of it that way. It is interesting. It popularized, at least briefly, orange wetsuits. The good guys wore the orange and the bad guys wore the black. But then after that, in a Bond movie, it was pretty much just basically black wetsuits from then on.
I can confirm that my wetsuit is black, so make of that what you will.
Was that a, cops and robbers, black and white kind of thing that they went with that way? Or do you think it was they had orange because it was a visibility underwater situation and you could tell the difference more?
I think it's because they're all wearing masks. It was more difficult to see who was who, so they made it easy by giving them different colored wetsuits.
Well, it's funny. In the novel, the big underwater fight takes place at night, and if I remember right, the good guys painted numbers on their backs so they could make them out in the dark. Yeah. Whereupon in the movie, it's like they're Spectre is going to plant the bomb in the middle of the day. And you have this shot from above, and you can see all the Spectre guys in the water. I mean, I don't know how high the plane that took that shot was, but it's not very close. So it's a little, let's bring the atomic bomb in the middle of the day where everybody can spot us. Of course, the answer to that is, so the audience can spot them. That's right. Why we're doing it.
I have done some night diving, and you don't see very much at all.
I have been enjoying a linen shirt now that I live down here in Texas, where it gets humid in the summers. Like having a nice breathable linen shirt really hits the spot. But I can't imagine, Bill, in the part of the country you're in, that you get a lot of use out of those.
Oh, something else about Thunderball. The late Robert McGinnis, who died about a year ago, to the end of his days, people would commission him to do Thunderball influenced illustrations, including some not safe for work.
Yeah.
Because there's this one, and I think it's still online if you know where to look. It's got Connery Bond. He's got his standing, his arms crossed. He's wearing that light red or pink shirt, swim trunks. And then like the women of Thunderball are either naked or topless. So somebody commissioned that, and McGinnis came through.
Yeah, that poster. I know I've got it framed in my living room. I know David's got it in his office as well. It wasn't until one of the books came out that I realized that it was actually two separate artists that, whose work adorns that poster, which I always just assumed it was the same person. But
yeah, Frank McCarthy was the
Frank
other
McCarthy.
one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any lines of dialogue that you quote from the movie?
Well, there's one that I find amusing, but as it turns out, it was dubbed in later. And that's where Bond comes back from Shrublands. He's going into M's office. Mind says, no, go to the conference room. It's something big. We bring in every 00 man from Europe. And Connery turns around and says, somebody's probably lost a dog. But as it turns out, the original scripted line was a Doctor Who reference, which is like, the Daleks have arrived. Well, obviously, somebody concluded that was a little too specialized. So then Connery comes back and dubs in the line we hear in the movie.
My favorite would be, I think he got the point.
I was going to say that's probably the one that I say all.
Yeah.
You can work it into different ways of normal conversation and people don't know. But yeah, there are a lot of, I think Thunderball probably has some of the best Connery one-liners in his tenure, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Something else about the 1965 script. It has something that it was like a preliminary version of the Marvel films mid-credits or end credits scene when you go through the titles and then there's an extra scene at the end. So they wrote one. Spectre was going to pick up the diamonds as the ransom. And so you cut back to the poor schleps who were supposed to pick up the diamonds, and it turns out they planted a bomb and they blow up. And that would have been the end. Well, either they didn't film it or thought better of it, because obviously it's not in the movie. The movie was 2 hours and 10 minutes as it was. It also is interesting in that 65 script, at least the one I've got, there were some things that they didn't have yet. And one was, that plane that picks up Bond and Domino at the end?
The Skyhook.
That's not in the copy of the script I have. Felix gets out, he's on a motorboat and picks him up. And, then you have the titles. I think that Thunderball was very much a project in flux. A lot of them were. A lot of the Bond movies were.
I mean, especially if you look at that output of 62, 63, 64, 65.
Yeah.
Like a Bond movie a year. Like you can't even picture that today.
No.
No.
Do you feel it pioneered anything regarding underwater photography in movies?
Yes. And these guys probably don't get the credit they deserve, but they hired a company headed by Ivan Tors. Now, Tors had produced I think it was a syndicated TV show called Sea Hunt. He also had done Flipper, which was a movie first and then a TV show. Anyway, they had the expertise that a lot of people didn't have at the time. So Riku Browning was the underwater director. Lamar Bourne was the underwater cameraman. Jordan Klein was the underwater engineer. They all get a credit. There's a title card with all three of their names in the main titles. And, I think they really had to lean on him hard. I think it must have been Lamar's wife, Evelyn Bourne. She was the underwater stunt woman.
For Domino, yeah.
Yeah. And she made an appearance on American TV in 1967. Show was to tell the truth. Panelists to figure out which of three people is the real one. So there was a very funny exchange. It was between one of the panelists and one of the imposters. And like this actress on the panel, and she asked, well, how is Sean Connery built? How is he built? The imposter says, yeah, I mean, how is he built? I think he's built very well. And, gets a big laugh out of the audience. Yeah, but anyway, but going back to Ivan Tors, so as mentioned before, John Steers ended up winning the special effects Oscar for Thunderball, but he was not present at the awards. So Ivan Tors accepted it on his behalf. So, and you can see this on YouTube. It's Dorothy Malone was the presenter. Bob Hope was the host of the show. It was the first Oscars telecast in color. Anyway, it's just interesting.
Was that the first Bond Oscar?
No, Goldfinger. Norman Wanstall on sound.
One thing relating to this, and I think that Thunderball, one of the reasons that Thunderball is my favorite is because I've always been fascinated by the undersea world. I remember I used to watch the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau with my parents and when I was a kid and so on. And so it's aligned with one of my natural interests. And so, I think I was 7 when my dad bought me a mask and fins and snorkel and so on, for example. So there's always that kind of that parallel with me and Bond. There's Bond doing something that I do too. But with regard to the photography, I don't think people actually appreciate how difficult it is to shoot underwater, because there's one thing is the visibility. In the Bahamas, I presume that the visibility is pretty good. It's what the Caribbean is renowned for. But if you go down 30 feet, you double atmospheric pressure. And I've been on dives with people where they've got 2,000 euros worth of camera equipment, and it's encased in a waterproof plastic case. They get a leak and they have ruined their camera. That is with modern equipment, which is, a lot better than they had in the 1960s. And it's far simpler because we're not talking about video equipment necessarily. We're just talking about still cameras for close-up photography of fish and coral and stuff like that. But, if you're putting film cameras down there, I think that must take an awful lot of technical ability to do it and actually bring the film up without ruining it.
Also, in those days, underwater communications was virtually non-existent. Mm-hmm. And I know this is on one of the documentaries on the home video. So they rented a barge. And so while they'd be on the barge up on the surface, kind of working out, choreographing the fight, and then did their best to try and recreate it once they were under the water. I mean, it had to be terribly, terribly difficult undertaking. And so anyway, as I said, when people talk about Thunderball, they don't even mention Ivan Tors and his crew, but they did a lot to bring this to life.
I would have to imagine in 1965, seeing the underwater sequences would be one of the big draws of the movie. That wasn't something you saw a lot of back then, and probably something like a modern audience would take for granted today from everything that's followed. But, whatever lessons that those people, like you mentioned, Ivan Tors learned, would then be utilized going forward on subsequent, not only Bond productions, but just other film productions, period.
Yeah. And the Bond people hired Lamar Bourne for later Bond films. I believe he worked on You Only Live Twice, and I believe he worked on The Spy Who Loved Me. Again, 2 movies with a decent amount of underwater action.
Do you have a favorite collectible related to the film?
I'm not really much of a collector, but I went to a 40th anniversary screening of Thunderball in London, and one of the goodies we got for that was Bond in scuba equipment.
Was it a reproduction of Action Man?
It's similar to Action Man. It's that kind of thing with all the jointed arms and stuff like that. But it seemed like it was much lower quality than Action Man. I've still got it somewhere, but never opened it.
You know, at Christmas, my siblings and I ended up getting this giant, pretty good-sized jigsaw puzzle. It was one of the main illustrations of the underwater fight. You know, Connery's not wearing a mask, so you could see his face. You know, whether it's Frank McCarthy or Robert McGinnis, I don't know, but that was pretty impressive to get it. You know, as a kid, getting that. It's long gone.
I think that image was, if I'm thinking of the same one, was a McCarthy one.
Mm.
For me, I've got from one of the Bond Stars events that you could submit online. I've got an autographed Luciana Paluzzi photo of the three women holding hands on the beach as there's a group of men behind watching on. But that would probably be my key piece of collectability from the movie. Outside of, I enjoyed seeing my poster quite a bit. And it's something I've had framed for 25 years now. So
yeah. Okay, I've just Googled this. It was Sideshow Collectibles did it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Along with back when they were making those 1/6 scale figures. They did a lot. They're not Hot Toys level in detail, but I think I had a Dr. No Connery and Die Another Day Brosnan.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the only two I had, but they made a whole range of different variants, I remember. How do you feel Thunderball holds up today now that it's 60 years later? There seems to be a lot of people complaining about the pacing, especially when you get to the underwater sequences.
That's never bothered me, to be honest. There is one bit where Connery goes off on some tangential mission during that sequence that I think is slightly confusing, unless you're fully concentrating, but I don't have a problem with it. I just enjoy the underwater stuff.
Yeah, and I think seeing it in a movie theater on a big screen, the underwater stuff is more impressive because, a lot of people haven't seen Thunderball until it was on home video. And, it's, and unless you have a giant TV set, it's not going to be nearly as impressive.
It was also the first Bond movie that opened up to that 2:35:1 aspect ratio, which gave it that widescreen feel more than the prior three too. I think that contributed to this feeling like, as they say on the posters, the biggest Bond of all.
Well, and they had to refilm the gun barrel because, of course, Bob Simmons had done the first three. And now with that wider ratio, Connery did it. And he wore a hat, to be consistent with the Bob Simmons version. Yeah, and then it was repeated with You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. But yeah.
There are certain aspects of the 60s attitudes, let's say,
mm-hmm.
that made my fiance cringe a little bit, particularly at Shrublands. Bond's behavior from modern sensibilities.
No, I think that's understandable. Probably in the 60s you could get away with that on film, but these days it is hard to watch that kind of behavior. I think so too. But on the other hand, it seems like a lot of the criticism is aimed only at Bond, implying that the Bond films alone were responsible for portraying this kind of behavior on screen. But it's not true at all. If you look at many films from that era, and you'll see this kind of thing going on. So yes, it's not okay, but it wasn't just the Bond films. It was cinema generally, I think.
Well, I think it's worth noting too. Like there will be people who complain about Daniel Craig in No Time to Die and how Nomi gives him a ride in her car twice, but Bond gets picked up by Fiona on the side of the road, and she drives him in the Mustang going, 100 miles an hour. And I think when you look at certain aspects, you have to look at the other side too. Like Domino just kills the villain at the end, That's not a typical thing that people think about. I feel like that, Bond doesn't defeat the villain. It's Domino. Like she has her prominence in the story and she gets her revenge. And I don't think enough of the people who critique the social aspects of it look at the flip side of how, she is empowered and saves the day.
That's the way to do a personal story, not being foster brother to Blofeld.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and also she and Largo, of course, had a thing going. And there's this one fleeting shot of the bedroom on the yacht. And, the ceiling is mirrors on it. Now, there's no comment made about it. This is when Largo is about to start torturing Domino to find out what Bond knew. But I imagine 65, a few eyebrows got raised. Just the fact it was there.
Yeah, because what would be the purpose for that otherwise?
Yeah.
What, as we close out the episode, what aspects of Thunderball would you like to see reflected in Bond 26?
Before we do that, there's one thing that we haven't talked about, which is the music. I don't think it's the best score, but it's a really solid score. I like the underwater music. Well, when I used to scuba dive, sometimes I used to find that I was playing it in my head when I was diving. And that's one of the thing. And also, I think, the variations of Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. There's the Cafe Martinique, I think is that, and there's the Death of Fiona, a variation, and I think they're used very effectively throughout. It's I enjoyed the score a lot. In fact, this morning when I was thinking about this podcast, I had a listen to that soundtrack. I enjoyed it.
Did you pre-order the La La Land CD?
No, I only found out about it yesterday, and I haven't even looked at it. And I found out about it from you two. So
they only announced it yesterday. So
all right, okay.
As of this recording, yeah,
as of this recording, September 1st. Well, I was about to say, in addition to everything David said about the score, John Barry was working under intense deadlines. I mean, it was very much a last minute thing. The editing on Thunderball was chaotic enough as it was. Terrence Young had taken off to go work on another project, so he wasn't there for all the post-production. And so that caused complications. A lot was riding on Peter Hunt. Yeah, and like I said, Barry was really, really working hard.
So, I overlooked this question. Are you a Thunderball person or a Kiss Kiss Bang Bang person? And if you are the latter, which version do you prefer?
Oh, God, what a question. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the theme song, to be honest.
The Tom Jones one.
The Tom Jones one. I think I would have to go with the Cafe Martinique version.
Instrumental.
It's an instrumental, but
you would put that over Dionne Warwick or Shirley Bassey? Yeah,
I think it's very atmospheric. If it were used as the title song, then I don't know what I would choose. We're 60 years on now, so I wouldn't actually remove Tom Jones or anything like that. But I think I do prefer Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
The Dionne Warwick version is timed up to the titles.
And it's on one of the audio commentaries on the home video.
Yeah, you can see the titles with Dionne Warwick singing that song, and you can see how it's linked up.
Bill, what's your preference of the different versions?
It was years later that I even discovered that there had been vocals, because when I first listened to the soundtrack album, I listened to it in my local library, and as Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang as the last take on side 2, and it was just an instrumental. And so I never really thought about it, as anything other than that. So I guess I'll say Thunderball by default. I can understand why they made the switch. It might have been Cubby Broccoli just felt it would be too weird to have a title song without the title in it. Anyway,
I had the Best of James Bond 30th anniversary. I thought it was 35th, but apparently it was 30th. It was a
Yeah.
cassette that I had, and then I later upgraded it to a CD, and then it was
I have it on CD as well.
a
Yeah.
dual CD, and that was right when I started, in 1994, like buying all this Bond stuff for myself because I had a job, and so that was the first time. And so for me, like the Dionne Warwick one was the one I preferred. I just love the swagger of it, and then when I got the 2 CD, that's where I discovered the Shirley Bassey one, and I love that as well because I like the continuity of her voice throughout all these different films.
Mm.
And no disrespect to Tom Jones, because I like that song also. You definitely throw me in the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang category, just for those memories alone. So, but yeah, it is a great score, and the way he, makes you feel like you're underwater, and some of the music cues of the Bond theme that you get that David Arnold later reuses. It's just an iconic score, and I'm really excited when that news dropped yesterday about the expanded La La Land CD, because I've got it on vinyl, and it's gotten better. The more I clean the record, it's gotten better, but like there's a skip during Thunderball, the main title track, that I've had to
That is
clean
annoying.
out. Yeah, so I'm excited to have it in one place, because between those CDs that I just mentioned and then various other compilations, I've got the score hodgepodged across different things. So to have it all in one place, remastered by friend of the show Neil S. Bulk, like I'm looking forward to getting to that whenever it ships, I think later this month. So going back though to that final question, what aspects of Thunderball would you like to see reflected in Bond 26? Bill?
Thunderball had big scale. I mean, because you had this feeling, I mean, this was like if not worldwide crisis, at least a significant part of the world. And, you had that sort of, I guess you'd call it central command room where M and one of the cabinet ministers are there. And along with Charles Ruchon as a U.S. military official, something of that sense, of that pace, I'm not saying something exactly like that, but just something that, that this is really important and you can get swept up in it. That would be what I'd like to see the new movie do.
What about for you, David?
I think one of the things of the early Bonds that I like, and which I like from the Fleming books, is the way in which Bond he's sent on his mission, and that's it. He's essentially stays where he is, or there's not much a change of geography. And the advantage of that is that you're able to take in where Bond is in much more than in the Daniel Craig movies, for example, where you're jumping from one location to another all the time, so it's like he's always on the move. I much prefer it where Bond arrives somewhere and you're allowed to absorb the place that he is. I think that for me, I would like Bond to do that under Amazon.
I think for me, and it's kind of similar to what you two were both saying, like I would just like to get back to the classic Bond on a mission. Most of the Daniel Craig era is centered on getting some kind of revenge or going rogue, and it'd just be nice to get back to he comes into the office, he's given a brief, and he's focused on that task. It doesn't have to have a personal connection, just this is your assignment, and he goes and carries it out. And I just like to get back to that classic feel and add, some of the old intrigue and bring in the one-liners again, but not be too self-conscious about it. And just that there's an essence of cool that Connery has, that's going to be up to whoever they cast. But to try and bring some of that back.
I'd love to have a Bond with decent one-liners, but I think they can be difficult to do, because if you look at the Pierce Brosnan era, they were always writing one-liners for him, but I don't think he ever really managed to pull them off very well. So yes, but no, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Well, that should do it for our look back at Thunderball. Bill, you have something else?
Yeah, real quick. In the middle of production, Sean Connery gave an extended interview to Playboy magazine. I read it years ago. And it's just interesting. You can sense his growing frustration. He was feeling trapped in the role. He just, anyway, you can sort of understand after you read it why he was looking for a way out. He originally signed a 6-picture deal, and originally they were supposed to do On Her Majesty's Secret Service after Thunderball and then do You Only Live Twice. And they ended up skipping Majesty's and going straight to You Only Live Twice, which had very little to do with the book anyway. Yeah, it makes for interesting reading. Just throw that out there.
Well, now you just made me think of a whole nother question of, the legacy being shooting 4 movies in 4 years and the burnout that caused with Connery, Like how did that, and that success of like going to a premiere and having a woman jump in the car with him, how that impacted his future decisions, and that, snowballs throughout the whole series.
And he was cramming in a lot of non-Bond movies in between. I mean, he was constantly working for a few years there.
Yeah. Probably it would have been very, very different for him if they'd been making the movies every 2 years. It would have given him much more breathing space. Instead, he was just, it was like that time of year again, it's Bond again.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Bill, where can people find you?
Well, I'm at the Spy Command, hmssweblog.wordpress.com. I'm on X and I'm on Blue Sky.
Any articles you want to point people to?
Oh, I've been kind of taking it easy lately.
The calm before the storm.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think there'd be much news this year, so I did my 60th anniversary Thunderball post like early in the year. So I don't know. Maybe I'll repeat it while noting it's a repeat.
And how about you, David?
Well, you can find me at thejamesbonddossier.com. I guess the main other outlet is YouTube, where I'm 007 Dossier. If you search for me, it's the name of the channel is the James Bond Dossier, like the website though. And I am on all the other socials, but I don't really use them very much.
Any particular articles or episodes you'd like to point people to?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. So just go there and dive in and find something you like.
As for me, you can find me at The Bond Is Not Enough on Instagram. Also, it's worth noting that the 007 Files has a YouTube channel where you can find the audio editions of these podcasts in addition to some video content as well. You can see an unboxing of the Connery 4K Steelbook set, comparing the 2 new No Time to Die Hot Toys, and as of this recording, I just put up my initial thoughts on 007 Road to a Million Season 2 with hopefully we'll get together sometime soon and have a chat about it as well. But all those are on our YouTube channel, the 007 Files, so please go and like and subscribe if you listen to this podcast. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you again so much for listening. The 007 Files will return.